What made you go on your villain arc? My brother Nathan was only 12 when Jackson Doyle decided to make him a target. I never planned to destroy an entire family, but sometimes protecting someone you love leads you down paths you never thought you'd travel. 3 years later, I still wake up wondering if I went too far, even as I watch Nathan sleep peacefully in the bedroom across from mine. The same Nathan who once cried himself to sleep every night, terrified of the next school day. It began with small things that first semester of 7th grade, Nathan coming home with his backpack soaking wet or finding his gym clothes stuffed in toilet bowls. I was 17 then, a high school senior focused on hockey scholarships and graduation. I noticed Nathan growing quieter, but attributed it to normal teenage moodiness rather than systematic torment. My first real clue came when I found him struggling to bandage cuts on his forearms one evening when our parents were at their monthly neighborhood association meeting. "What happened?" I asked from his doorway, making him jump and quickly pull down his sleeves. The panic in his eyes told me this wasn't just a skateboarding accident or playground mishap. "Nothing," he mumbled, avoiding eye contact. "I fell during gym." I crossed the room and gently pushed up his sleeve, revealing several angry red scratches that looked suspiciously like fingernail marks. "That doesn't look like falling to me, Nate. Who did this to you?" His eyes filled with tears that he furiously tried to blink away. "It doesn't matter. Telling only makes it worse. That's what everyone says." That night, I got the whole story. How Jackson Doyle, an 8th grader built like a high school sophomore, had been systematically terrorizing Nathan for weeks. It started with shoves in the hallway, escalated to tripping him in the cafeteria, and had recently become physical attacks in the locker room where teacher supervision was minimal. Nathan showed me bruises on his ribs and back from being slammed into lockers, each one making my blood boil hotter. "Have you told Mom and Dad?" I asked, already knowing the answer from their oblivious behavior at dinner. Nathan shook his head. "Dad will just say I need to stand up for myself. Mom will freak out and make everything worse by calling the school." He wasn't wrong. Our father, Kevin Reynolds, was a former military man who believed that life's problems should be handled head-on with confidence he had never bothered to help Nathan develop. Our mother, Elaine, meant well, but had a tendency to escalate situations with her emotional reactions. Neither approach would help Nathan navigate the complex social warfare of middle school. "I'll handle it," I promised, pulling him into a hug. "You're not alone in this anymore." The next morning, I drove Nathan to school instead of letting him take the bus where Jackson had free rein. I walked him all the way to his first class, ignoring the embarrassed looks he shot me. In the hallway, I spotted Jackson immediately. He stood out not just because of his size, but because of the way smaller kids instinctively created space around him as they passed, like prey animals sensing a predator. I approached him directly, maintaining my senior year confidence despite the fact that this 13-year-old was already nearly my height. "Jackson," I said quietly, backing him toward the lockers, "I'm Nathan Reynolds' brother. If you touch him again, we're going to have a serious problem." Jackson's face registered surprise, then contempt. "Your brother's a whiny little bitch who can't fight his own battles," he sneered. "What are you going to do about it? Beat up a middle schooler? You'll get arrested." He was right, of course. At 17, almost 18, I couldn't lay hands on him without serious legal consequences. But the smirk on his face as he pushed past me solidified my resolve to find another way to protect Nathan. For a few days, my presence at drop-off and pickup seemed to deter Jackson. Nathan reported a blessed week of being left alone. I started to hope the simple threat had been enough. Then came the Wednesday that changed everything. The day Jackson decided to prove he wasn't intimidated. I was at hockey practice when my phone lit up with texts from Nathan. The sequence still burns in my memory. Jackson followed me after school. He has my backpack. He's throwing my stuff everywhere. Help. By the time I arrived at the middle school 20 minutes later, an ambulance was parked in the bus loop, its lights flashing silently. Cold fear gripped my chest as I sprinted toward the gathering crowd, pushing through curious onlookers until I spotted Nathan sitting on a bench, holding an ice pack to his face. His right eye was swollen completely shut. Blood caked around his nostrils and staining his favorite blue shirt. A teacher I didn't recognize was sitting beside him, looking simultaneously concerned and overwhelmed. "What happened?" I demanded, kneeling in front of Nathan. The teacher answered for him. "There was an incident on the practice field. Nathan was hit in the face with a football. The paramedics are checking him for a concussion and possible orbital fracture." "A football doesn't do this," I said, gesturing to Nathan's injuries. "This was deliberate. We didn't see exactly what happened," the teacher said carefully. "Several students were involved in a rough game that got out of hand." Nathan removed the ice pack, wincing. "Jackson said he wanted to play catch. Then he threw the ball straight at my face from like 5 feet away, as hard as he could, on purpose." His voice broke. He was laughing when I fell down. The paramedics insisted on taking Nathan to the hospital, where we learned he had narrowly escaped a detached retina. The doctor said another centimeter to the left, and he might have lost vision in that eye permanently. My parents met us there, my mother fluttering around Nathan while my father stood stoically in the corner, asking pointed questions about exactly what Nathan had been doing when the incident occurred, as if searching for ways Nathan might have prevented it. The following morning, my father drove us to meet with Principal Dennis Fraser, a balding man with perpetually sweaty palms and a politician's smile. Nathan recounted what happened while I watched Fraser's face for signs of appropriate outrage. Instead, I saw calculation, the kind of risk assessment that had nothing to do with student safety and everything to do with administrative convenience. This sounds like a case of roughhousing that went too far, Fraser concluded, folding his hands on his desk. Boys at this age don't always understand their own strength or the consequences of their actions. Roughhousing? I repeated in disbelief. Nathan has a concussion and almost lost his vision. This wasn't an accident. Fraser's smile remained fixed. Jackson Doyle has no prior disciplinary issues on his record. He's a star athlete with a promising future in our sports program. I understand your frustration, but we need to approach this as what it was, a playful microaggression, rather than malicious intent. My father surprisingly backed me up. My son's medical bills say otherwise, Mr. Fraser. What consequences will this boy face? Fraser cleared his throat. Jackson will receive in-school counseling about appropriate play and 2 days of lunch detention for roughhousing. I believe that's proportional to the situation. I stared at him in stunned disbelief. Lunch detention? For nearly blinding someone? The school has a clear protocol for these situations, Fraser explained with practiced patience. Without multiple witnesses willing to testify to deliberate intent to harm, our disciplinary options are limited. I suggest Nathan take a few days to recover at home, and we'll make sure his assignments are sent electronically. As we left the office, I caught sight of Jackson lounging in a chair outside the counselor's room, scrolling through his phone without a care in the world. He looked up as we passed, and the corner of his mouth lifted in the barest suggestion of a smirk. In that moment, I understood that the system would never protect Nathan. The adults who should have defended him were more interested in protecting the school's athletics program and avoiding confrontation with Jackson's family. That night, I overheard my parents discussing the situation in hushed tones in the kitchen. Nathan needs to learn to stand up for himself, my father insisted. The world is full of bullies. He can't always expect someone to fight his battles. He's 12, Kevin, my mother responded tiredly. And that boy is twice his size. Then he needs to be smarter. Travel in groups. Avoid confrontation. These are life skills. So we just tell him to avoid this Jackson kid for the next 2 years until high school? That's your solution? My father sighed heavily. These things usually blow over if you don't feed into them. The more attention we give it, the worse it gets. Nathan needs to just keep his head down, ignore the bullying, and eventually this kid will get bored and move on to someone else. I slipped away before they noticed me, a cold resolution forming in my mind. I wasn't going to wait for Jackson to get bored while my brother suffered, and I wasn't going to rely on adults who had already proven they valued peace over justice. If the system wouldn't protect Nathan, I would find another way, even if it meant becoming someone I never thought I'd be. The next day, I skipped afternoon classes and drove to the middle school, parking across the street where I could watch the buses load after dismissal. I followed Jackson's bus at a careful distance, noting which stop he used and watching which direction he walked afterward. For 3 consecutive days, I observed his route home, timing his arrival and departure, studying the neighborhood layout. The Doyle residence turned out to be a well-maintained 2-story home in an upper-middle-class neighborhood about a mile from the school. Through careful observation and strategic social media stalking, I pieced together the family dynamics. Richard Doyle worked as an investment advisor at a regional firm, putting in long hours and traveling frequently. Melissa Doyle ran a small interior design business from home and volunteered with several community organizations. Jackson was their only child, and his athletic achievements dominated their social media presence. I learned that Richard struggled with depression, information I gleaned from a support group post Melissa had made, seeking advice about helping a spouse through difficult times. I discovered that the Doyles' marriage had weathered rough patches, based on vague references in Melissa's private blog that I accessed through some creative password guessing. Most importantly, I learned that Richard's position at his firm had recently become precarious due to a reorganization, creating financial stress that he was hiding from both his family and his social circle. Armed with this knowledge, I began constructing a plan that would hurt Jackson in the only way that seemed appropriate, by dismantling the family structure that enabled his behavior and shielded him from consequences. I didn't want to merely inconvenience him or cause temporary discomfort. I wanted him to understand what it felt like to have your security stripped away, to live in constant fear of what might come next, just like Nathan had been forced to do. My first move was relatively simple. Using an anonymous email account created through a VPN, I sent Melissa Doyle screenshots of a fake dating profile I'd created using Richard's photographs and information. The profile included suggestive messages supposedly exchanged with other women, carefully edited to appear authentic. I included details about Richard's work schedule and travel dates that I'd gleaned from their social media, adding credibility to the deception. The email was designed to sow seeds of doubt rather than provide definitive proof. I thought you should know, I wrote. I matched with your husband on this site and we've been messaging for a few weeks. He said you two have an arrangement, but something feels off. If I'm wrong, I'm sorry to bother you. For 2 weeks, nothing visible happened. Nathan reported that Jackson seemed distracted at school, less focused on tormenting him, but still threatening whenever they crossed paths. I continued my surveillance, noting changes in the family's routine. Richard coming home earlier, Melissa making more phone calls from her car, tension visible even from a distance. The second phase of my plan required more direct action. During a Friday night when the Doyles attended Jackson's basketball game, I broke into their house using the spare key they kept hidden under a potted plant near their back door, a location Melissa had inadvertently revealed in a home renovation blog post about creating a seamless indoor-outdoor flow for entertaining. Inside, I moved with careful precision, wearing gloves and leaving minimal evidence of my presence. My target was Richard's medication, the antidepressants he kept in their ensuite bathroom medicine cabinet. I replaced his prescribed sertraline with similar-looking over-the-counter pills that would do nothing to manage his depression, keeping the original label and bottle to avoid suspicion. The effect wouldn't be immediate, but over time, his condition would deteriorate as he believed he was taking his proper medication. I also planted additional evidence of infidelity, a carefully crafted receipt for jewelry Richard had never purchased, hidden where Melissa would eventually find it while cleaning, and a burner phone with manufactured text messages suggesting an ongoing affair tucked into a seldom-used pocket of Richard's travel bag. The impact of my actions unfolded gradually over the next month. From Nathan's reports and my own observations, I pieced together the deterioration of the Doyle household. Richard became increasingly irritable as his untreated depression worsened. Melissa became suspicious and confrontational, demanding explanations for discrepancies in his schedule and spending. Jackson's basketball performance suffered as home stress affected his concentration, resulting in reduced playing time that further strained the family dynamic. The situation escalated when Melissa found the planted phone during a particularly heated argument. The ensuing confrontation was loud enough that neighbors called the police, creating a public record of domestic disturbance. Richard vehemently denied the affairs, growing increasingly desperate as evidence mounted against him despite his genuine innocence. As Richard's mental health deteriorated without his medication's support, he became paranoid and withdrawn. His work performance suffered, placing his already tenuous job security at greater risk. Melissa began consulting with a divorce attorney, a fact I confirmed by observing her meeting the lawyer at a cafe near her office. Throughout this process, I maintained careful distance, never directly involving myself beyond my initial manipulations. I watched through social media and occasional drive-bys as the situation I had engineered spun further out of control. Jackson's behavior at school changed dramatically, his aggression replaced by withdrawal as his home life disintegrated. Nathan reported that Jackson had stopped attending some classes, often found sitting alone in the hallways instead of participating in the social dominance he had once enjoyed. The breaking point came approximately 6 weeks after I began my intervention. Richard Doyle, suffering from untreated depression and facing the collapse of both his marriage and career, disappeared after an explosive argument with Melissa. His car was found abandoned near Fairfield Bridge, a notorious local suicide location. After a 3-day search, his body was recovered from the river. The news hit our community hard. The middle school held a special assembly about grief and mental health. Counselors were made available to students, particularly those on Jackson's basketball team. Principal Fraser, who had dismissed Nathan's assault as playful microaggression, now spoke solemnly about the importance of kindness and supporting classmates through difficult times. I felt nothing. Not satisfaction or remorse, just a hollow acknowledgement that the plan I had set in motion had reached its devastating conclusion. I had expected to feel vindicated seeing Jackson experience consequences far worse than what he had inflicted on Nathan. Instead, I found myself methodically destroying the evidence of my involvement, deleting accounts, disposing of materials, ensuring no connection could ever be traced back to me. Melissa Doyle spiraled in the aftermath of Richard's death. Initially, she channeled her grief into anger, blaming Richard for abandoning their family and leaving her with debts she hadn't known existed. As Richard's financial troubles came to light, the comfortable life the Doyles had maintained proved to be largely smoke and mirrors. The interior design business couldn't support their mortgage and lifestyle, forcing Melissa to seek full-time employment while battling depression of her own. Her drinking, which had been social before Richard's death, became problematic. Jackson, now practically parentless as Melissa worked days and drank evenings, began missing school regularly. Neighbors reported arguments that sometimes became physical, with Melissa lashing out at her son in fits of intoxicated rage. She blamed him for adding stress to their marriage with his behavioral problems the school had systematically minimized and hidden from her. Child Protective Services became involved after Jackson showed up at school with a broken wrist that had gone untreated for 2 days. The investigation revealed neglect and emotional abuse stemming from Melissa's deteriorating mental health and substance issues. Jackson was temporarily placed with his maternal grandmother while Melissa entered a court-mandated treatment program. She never completed it. 3 months after Richard's suicide, Melissa Doyle emptied their joint bank accounts, packed a single suitcase, and disappeared. The mortgage went unpaid, the design business clients were abandoned, and Jackson was left permanently in his grandmother's care in a different school district 40 miles away. I had not anticipated the totality of the destruction I would cause. What began as a mission to protect Nathan became something darker, a calculated dismantling of an entire family unit. The Jackson, who occasionally appeared in social media photos from his new school, bore little resemblance to the confident bully who had terrorized my brother. His eyes held the same haunted look I had once seen in Nathan's, the look of someone who lived in constant fear of what might happen next. Nathan recovered physically, though the emotional scars lingered. He remained jumpy around larger boys and avoided sports involving flying objects. When news of Richard's suicide reached us, he asked me quietly if I thought Jackson would be okay. The question hit me like a physical blow. Nathan, who had suffered at Jackson's hands, still retained enough empathy to worry about his tormentor's well-being. I wondered when exactly I had lost that same capacity for compassion. 2 years later, as I prepared to leave for college, I still monitor the digital footprints of both Doyles. Melissa occasionally resurfaces in social media check-ins from various states, never staying in one place long, her appearance increasingly haggard in each new profile picture. Jackson lives with his grandmother permanently now, his athletic ambitions apparently abandoned in favor of more solitary pursuits, like computer programming. Neither of them has any idea that their family's collapse wasn't just bad luck or Richard's mental health issues, but the result of a calculated campaign of destruction orchestrated by a teenager they never even met. Nathan has flourished in high school now that Jackson's shadow no longer looms over him. He joined the debate team, made genuine friends, and recently started dating a girl from his biology class. When I watch him laughing with his friends or enthusiastically explaining a new interest, I tell myself that protecting his future was worth the price I paid in becoming someone capable of such calculated cruelty. But in the darkness before sleep comes, I sometimes wonder about ripple effects I never considered. Did Richard Doyle have elderly parents who lost their only son? Did Melissa have younger siblings who lost their sister to addiction and instability? Does Jackson's grandmother struggle to connect with a traumatized boy suddenly thrust into her care late in life? How many lives were altered by my decision to appoint myself judge, jury, and executioner for a 13-year-old bully? The most disturbing realization came gradually. I'm good at this. The calculated manipulation, the patient observation, the exploitation of vulnerabilities. These skills came naturally to me in a way that should probably be concerning. There's a certain cold clarity in viewing human relationships as systems that can be analyzed and destabilized with the right pressure applied at the right points. Sometimes I catch myself assessing the people around me, not as individuals, but as networks of weaknesses waiting to be exploited. I never told Nathan what I did. He believes, as everyone does, that the Doyle family's collapse was simply tragic coincidence, bad luck piling on until the center couldn't hold. Sometimes he mentions Jackson with a mixture of pity and lingering fear, wondering aloud what became of him after his sudden transfer. I offer non-committal responses while carrying the weight of knowing exactly what happened and why. If asked what made me go on my villain arc, I would say it was watching systems fail someone I loved. It was realizing that proper channels protect institutions, not individuals. It was understanding that sometimes destruction is the only language bullies and their enablers understand. But the truth is, both simpler and more complex. I became a villain because I could. Because once I started down that path, dismantling the Doyle family piece by calculated piece, I discovered an aptitude for it that was both thrilling and terrifying. Did I go too far? Undoubtedly. Would I do it again to protect Nathan? Without hesitation. That's the thing about villain arcs. They rarely begin with someone deciding to be evil. They start with justifiable anger, righteous indignation, and the conviction that the end justifies the means. By the time you realize you've crossed lines you once thought uncrossable, the person you used to be feels like a distant acquaintance rather than your former self. As I pack for college, preparing to study psychology with a focus on organizational behavior, I sometimes catch my reflection and wonder if others can see it, the capacity for calculated cruelty that now lives behind my eyes. I wonder if my future classmates and professors would recoil if they knew what I'm capable of when someone I love is threatened. Most of all, I wonder if the version of me that existed before Jackson Doyle entered our lives would recognize the person I've become. What made me go on my villain arc? A system that protects the powerful at the expense of the vulnerable. A society that tells victims to adapt rather than demanding that abusers change. Adults who choose convenience over justice. But mostly, the discovery that when those systems fail, I have both the capacity and the willingness to burn everything down and salt the earth where it once stood. In my darker moments, I don't regret what I did to the Doyles. I regret that it was necessary. I regret that no adult stood up when they should have, forcing a 17-year-old to deliver the justice they wouldn't. Most of all, I regret discovering how easy it is to become the monster when fighting monsters, and how difficult it is to find your way back once you've learned to embrace that darkness.